Before you scroll away, hear this with your spirit wide open, because what you are about to receive is not just a motivational message, it is a divine confirmation that heaven has been watching, that nothing slipped past the eyes of the Almighty, that every whisper spoken behind your back, every scheme crafted in darkness, every hidden betrayal carried out with a smile in public and poison in private was fully seen, fully recorded, and fully understood by the God who never sleeps and never misses a detail. And if you have ever felt confused about why certain things happened, why certain people suddenly changed, why doors closed without explanation, why you were treated unfairly without proof or defense, then this message is for you, because God saw what they did in secret and He has not ignored it, He has not dismissed it, and He has not forgotten you. There were conversations you were never invited into, plans that were made without your knowledge, lies that were carefully planted to damage your reputation, subtle manipulations designed to make you look unstable, unworthy, or incapable, and while you were trying to move in integrity, trying to stay faithful, trying to love genuinely and trust openly, there were those who chose secrecy over honesty, deception over truth, and jealousy over loyalty. But here is the revelation that changes everything. God was in the room even when you were not. He heard the tone of their voices, He saw the intention behind their smiles, He felt the motive behind their actions, and He knows the full story that you only experienced in fragments. So do not let temporary silence from heaven make you believe that heaven was unaware, because divine silence is not divine blindness, and just because God did not interrupt them immediately does not mean He approved of what they did. Sometimes God allows exposure to develop slowly because He is building a case that cannot be denied. Sometimes He allows the mask to stay on just long enough for the truth to become undeniable, and sometimes He lets you walk away confused so that later you can look back and realize that what felt like rejection was actually divine protection, because if He had exposed everything at once you might have reacted emotionally, you might have tried to defend yourself in ways that would damage your own character, you might have stepped into battles that were never yours to fight. But God fights differently, God moves strategically, God sees the end from the beginning, and when He decides to reveal what was hidden, it will not be partial or unclear, it will be complete and undeniable. Understand this deeply: the pain you felt when you sensed something was wrong but could not prove it, the heaviness in your spirit when certain names were mentioned, the sudden distance from people who once seemed close, the subtle tension in rooms where you used to feel comfortable. None of that was imagination. Your spirit was picking up on what your eyes could not see, and God was allowing your discernment to sharpen while He handled the evidence, because there are moments in life when you are not meant to confront, you are meant to observe, and while you were observing in confusion, God was documenting in clarity. And now you stand at the edge of a divine shift where what was done in darkness cannot remain hidden forever. Because Scripture declares that nothing concealed will not be disclosed and nothing hidden will not be made known. And that is not just a warning to the wicked, it is comfort to the faithful, it is reassurance to the betrayed, it is hope to the misunderstood. You may have cried in private wondering why God allowed certain people to speak against you. You may have questioned whether He heard your silent prayers when you said, "Lord, you see what's happening. You know I didn't deserve this, and I need you to understand that He not only heard you, He agreed with you. He saw the injustice, He saw the manipulation, He saw the envy, He saw the quiet sabotage, and He has been working behind the scenes in ways you cannot yet fully comprehend, because when God sees wrongdoing done against His child, He does not respond impulsively, he responds perfectly, and his timing is never rushed and never late. There are seasons where it looks like those who wronged you are thriving, smiling, progressing, gaining influence, receiving applause. And you may have wondered how that is possible if God truly saw what they did, but elevation without integrity is temporary, success built on deception is fragile, and influence sustained by lies is unstable, and the very foundation of anything built in darkness eventually collapses under the weight of truth, because God does not need your help to expose what He already sees. He simply waits until exposure serves a greater purpose than revenge, because His goal is not just to punish, His goal is to reveal truth, refine you, and realign destiny. What they meant for harm will not cancel your calling. What they tried to hide will not erase your assignment. What they whispered in corners will not override what God declared over you in eternity. And while they thought secrecy gave them control, they underestimated the sovereignty of a God who controls outcomes. And now you are stepping into a season where clarity will replace confusion, where peace will replace paranoia, where restoration will replace loss, and where God will show you that He allowed certain exits because He was preparing greater entrances. There is something powerful about knowing that you do not have to chase vindication, because when God vindicates, it is public, precise, and permanent, and when He restores, He does it in ways that make the past pain look small compared to the coming glory. And this is why you must resist the temptation to grow bitter. Because bitterness would only tie you to the very people God is trying to separate you from, and resentment would only delay the elevation that requires a clean heart. So release the need to understand every detail of what they did, release the urge to replay every conversation trying to decode hidden meanings, release the burden of proving your innocence to those committed to misunderstanding you, because the one whose opinion truly matters has already seen the truth. Let this sink into your spirit deeply. God saw what they did in secret, and He is not intimidated by their strategy, not confused by their manipulation, not deceived by their presentation, and not pressured by their timeline. He is orchestrating outcomes you cannot yet see. He is repositioning people around you who operate in authenticity. He is removing hidden adversaries disguised as allies, and He is strengthening your discernment so that the next time something feels off you will trust your spirit sooner, and you will not ignore divine warnings for the sake of comfort. This was never just about what they did, it is about what God is doing, because sometimes betrayal is the doorway to breakthrough, sometimes exposure is the catalyst for expansion, sometimes being misunderstood is the prerequisite for being uniquely positioned, and sometimes losing access to certain people is the very thing that protects your future. And when the truth surfaces, and it will, you will not need to celebrate their downfall. You will simply stand in quiet confidence knowing that God defended you without you having to fight, that He preserved your name without you having to argue, that He honored your integrity without you having to retaliate. So breathe again, release the anxiety, let go of the overthinking, stop questioning your worth based on their behavior, and remember that the God who saw what they did in secret also sees what you did in private. He saw your restraint when you wanted to react. He saw your tears when you felt alone. He saw your prayers when you did not know what else to do. He saw your decision to stay kind when it would have been easier to be cold, and that faithfulness in hidden places is what qualifies you for public favor, because heaven does not reward performance, it rewards purity. And now the same God who witnessed the secret offense is preparing a visible restoration, a tangible shift, a divine turnaround that will make it clear that your story was never at the mercy of their secrecy, it was always secured in His sovereignty. And as you move forward from this moment, do not carry the weight of what they did, carry the confidence of what God is about to do, because when God sees injustice done against you, He does not ignore it, He transforms it into a setup for something greater, and the same eyes that saw their secret actions are the same eyes watching over your destiny, ensuring that no hidden scheme can cancel what He has already written for your life. And as you continue walking through this season with questions still lingering in your mind and memories that sometimes try to replay themselves late at night, understand that part 2 of this revelation goes even deeper, because it is not only about the fact that God saw what they did in secret, it is about what He is now doing in response to it, and the response of heaven is never emotional, never chaotic, never impulsive, but always intentional, precise, and divinely strategic, because while you were processing pain on the surface, God was processing purpose in the spirit. And there were layers to that betrayal you could not see, layers of jealousy that had been building for years, layers of insecurity triggered by your growth, layers of comparison that turned admiration into competition, and competition into quiet hostility, and although you thought everything was normal, there were people studying you not to celebrate you but to calculate you, watching your patterns not to support you but to find weaknesses, smiling at your progress while secretly hoping for your setback. And yet even in that uncomfortable truth there is something powerful you must realize. None of it caught God off guard, none of it threatened your destiny, and none of it altered the promise over your life, because before they ever spoke against you in private, God had already spoken over you in eternity, and what He speaks overrides what they whisper. There is a reason certain connections suddenly became strained, a reason certain invitations stopped coming, a reason certain environments began to feel heavy, and it was not because you lost value, it was because your presence began to expose what they were trying to hide. And when light enters a room, darkness does not debate, it reacts, and sometimes the reaction looks like distance, sometimes it looks like gossip, sometimes it looks like silent treatment, and sometimes it looks like coordinated misunderstanding, but the root is always the same, conviction, because your integrity became a mirror they did not want to look into. Your discipline became a reminder of their compromise, your growth became a threat to their comfort, and instead of rising with you they chose to undermine you. But what they failed to understand is that undermining someone protected by God only accelerates the very elevation they were trying to prevent. There were moments when you felt isolated and wondered if maybe you were the problem, if maybe you were too sensitive, too ambitious, too different, too intense, too focused, too spiritual, too much. And that self-doubt was one of the deepest wounds because it attacked your identity. But the truth is you were not too much, you were just too aligned for environments built on pretense, and alignment often creates friction with those who prefer compromise, and that friction is not a sign to shrink, it is a signal to shift, because God will not allow you to permanently dwell in spaces where your authenticity becomes a threat rather than a blessing. Remember how certain conversations felt rehearsed, how certain compliments felt forced, how certain support felt conditional, and how your intuition kept nudging you that something beneath the surface was not right. That was not paranoia, that was protection, that was God gently alerting you without fully exposing everything yet, because sometimes if He showed you the whole truth too early it would break your heart beyond what you were ready to handle. So He reveals in measures, He separates in stages, He uncovers in timing. And all the while He strengthens you internally so that when the full truth becomes clear you are mature enough not to crumble but to stand steady, and now you are entering a phase where the consequences of secret actions begin to unfold naturally, not because you wished harm on anyone, not because you plotted revenge, but because spiritual laws are real and what is sown in darkness eventually manifests in daylight, and while you focus on healing, they may begin to experience instability, confusion, exposure, or unexpected reversals, and you must guard your heart in that season because it will be tempting to feel validated by their downfall, but your validation does not come from watching others fall, it comes from watching God remain faithful to you, and the greatest victory is not seeing them embarrassed, it is seeing yourself unbothered, unmoved, and unbroken. There is something transformative about reaching a point where you no longer need an apology to move forward, where you no longer crave explanation to find peace, where you no longer require public acknowledgement of wrongdoing to feel secure, because you have settled it within your spirit that God saw everything and that is enough, and when that confidence settles into your soul it changes how you walk, how you speak, how you respond, and how you choose your next circle, because discernment sharpens through experience, and what once confused you will no longer distract you, what once hurt you will no longer control you, and what once blindsided you will now be recognized early. You are not leaving this season empty-handed, you are leaving it wiser, stronger, more spiritually alert, more emotionally disciplined, and more strategically aligned with your purpose, and the same situation that attempted to weaken your faith has actually refined it, because now your trust in God is not based on visible fairness but on invisible assurance, not on immediate justice but on eventual vindication, not on people's loyalty but on divine sovereignty. Understand that when God sees something done in secret against you, He does more than defend, He recalibrates, He reorders relationships, He rearranges access, He reassigns roles, and He removes masks, and sometimes you will look back and realize that what felt like loss was actually filtration, what felt like betrayal was actually revelation, and what felt like isolation was actually preparation, because there are levels of favor that require fewer distractions, levels of clarity that require quieter circles, and levels of calling that require the absence of hidden agendas. So as you move forward, do not carry suspicion into every new relationship, do not project past wounds onto future allies, do not assume that everyone is secretly against you, because healing means you trust God more than you fear people, and when you trust that He sees, you stop obsessing over who might be plotting, because you know no plot can override His plan. And no secret conversation can cancel a divine covenant. This next chapter of your life will not be defined by what they did behind closed doors, it will be defined by what God is doing in open spaces, by the doors He is about to unlock, by the clarity He is about to provide, by the peace He is about to settle in your spirit, and by the undeniable evidence that your name is protected, your purpose is preserved, and your future is not fragile, because the God who saw the secret offense is now orchestrating a visible turnaround. And when it unfolds you will not need to explain your silence, you will not need to justify your distance, you will not need to defend your decisions, because the fruit will speak, the favor will speak, the stability will speak, and the elevation will speak, and all you will have to do is continue walking in integrity, continue choosing peace over retaliation, continue trusting timing over impulse, And continue remembering that nothing done in secret against you escaped the sight of a God who never misses a detail and never abandons his own. Now as we move into this next depth of understanding, let your heart settle, because part 3 is not about revisiting the pain but about recognizing the power that was forged in you while everything was happening behind the scenes, because when God saw what they did in secret, he was not only preparing justice, he was preparing you, strengthening your inner foundation in ways that comfort never could, building spiritual muscles that only resistance can develop, and shaping a version of you that cannot be easily shaken again. Because there is something about silent betrayal that forces you into deeper dependence on God, something about being misunderstood that drives you into prayer, something about being misrepresented that makes you cling to truth, and in that hidden process you were not being diminished, you were being defined. Think about how you handle situations now compared to before, how quickly your discernment activates, how calmly you observe instead of reacting, how you no longer overshare your plans with everyone, how you protect your peace with boundaries that once felt uncomfortable to enforce, and realize that this wisdom did not come randomly, it was cultivated in the very season where you felt the most uncertain, because when trust is broken, awareness is born, and awareness is not cynicism, it is clarity, and clarity is a gift that protects destiny. There were nights you wrestled with questions, asking why God allowed certain people close to you if they were capable of deception, why he permitted access to individuals who would eventually misuse it, and the answer is layered, because sometimes God allows temporary access to reveal permanent lessons, sometimes he permits proximity to expose character, and sometimes he lets you experience betrayal not to wound you but to awaken you, because there were things about your own strength, resilience, and spiritual authority that you would not have discovered without pressure. And pressure reveals capacity. Understand that your response mattered more than their action, because while they chose secrecy and manipulation, you chose restraint and integrity, and that choice shifted the spiritual atmosphere around your life, that choice invited divine defense, that choice aligned you with favor that cannot be manufactured, because heaven responds to posture. And your posture in that season was not perfect but it was sincere. You cried yet you trusted, you questioned yet you believed. You felt hurt yet you refused to become harmful, and that internal battle built a level of maturity that positions you for influence without corruption. Now here is the deeper revelation. Sometimes God allows people to reveal themselves privately before he exposes them publicly so that you can detach emotionally before the truth becomes undeniable, because if exposure came while you were still emotionally attached, you might have tried to protect them, defend them, or deny reality. But God in his mercy slowly loosened your grip, slowly shifted your perspective, slowly allowed distance to grow, and by the time clarity arrived your heart was no longer entangled in the same way, and that was protection disguised as confusion. You are stepping into a dimension where what once felt like a setback now looks like a setup, where the very separation that hurt you is creating space for healthier alliances, where the silence that once felt awkward is now peaceful, where the loneliness that once felt heavy is now freeing, because you are realizing that not everyone who starts with you is meant to stay with you, and not everyone who celebrates you publicly is committed to you privately, and that awareness is not bitterness, it is discernment sharpened by experience. There is also a shift happening in the unseen realm, because when God sees injustice he does not merely plan correction, he plans compensation, and compensation from heaven is never equal, it is multiplied. It is abundant, It is beyond what you lost, because God does not restore at the same level, He restores at a higher level, and that means the loyalty coming into your life will be deeper than what you experienced before, the opportunities will be cleaner, the partnerships will be more aligned, the environments will be healthier, and the peace will be steadier, because you are no longer the same version of yourself who tolerated subtle red flags for the sake of comfort. Remember that secrecy thrives in environments where truth is not confronted, but now you are becoming someone who values transparency, someone who listens to intuition, someone who prays before trusting blindly, someone who observes patterns instead of dismissing them, and that evolution makes you harder to deceive, and that is not arrogance, it is growth. And as the days move forward you may witness subtle shifts in the lives of those who operated in secret. Not because you wished it but because hidden motives cannot sustain long-term stability, and when instability begins to surface you must resist the urge to say, "I knew it," because your peace is more powerful than your proof, your silence is more powerful than your validation, and your forward movement is more powerful than revisiting the past. This is the chapter where you stop asking why it happened and start thanking God that it did, because had it not happened you might still be surrounded by disguised opposition. You might still be investing energy in people who were draining you quietly, you might still be unaware of how strong you truly are, and strength discovered through adversity carries a different weight. It carries confidence without pride, awareness without fear, boldness without aggression. The truth is God saw what they did in secret, but He also saw what you did in secret. He saw your discipline when no one applauded, He saw your kindness when it was not reciprocated, He saw your growth when no one acknowledged it. He saw your tears when no one comforted you, and that hidden faithfulness is now creating visible favor, because promotion in the spirit precedes promotion in the physical, and elevation in character precedes elevation in status, and you have already passed tests you did not even realize you were taking. So step into this new level without carrying suspicion, without carrying fear, without carrying resentment, because what is ahead of you requires emotional freedom, it requires spiritual clarity, it requires a heart that trusts God more than it fears betrayal, and the same God who saw every secret act against you is the same God orchestrating every public blessing toward you, ensuring that your story will not end in confusion but in confirmation, not in humiliation but in honor, not in defeat but in divine distinction. And when everything settles you will look back and understand that what they did in secret was never powerful enough to stop what God had already written for your life. It only became the backdrop for a testimony that proves once and for all that when God is watching over you, no hidden scheme can override His visible promise.